What would you do if you had to choose between infinite wealth and a stranger's soul? Most people think they know the answer. Most people believe they are good. Most people have never stood before an alien king with gold piled higher than mountains and a girl screaming silently behind iron chains. This is not a story about a hero. This is the story of Marcus Kane, the man who looked into the eyes of someone who had suffered for 200 years and walked away with pockets full of gold. And what happened next destroyed everything he thought he knew about himself. The throne room of King Vaelthrix was not meant for human eyes. Walls of living metal breathed in the darkness. Crystals older than Earth's sun pulsed with light that seemed almost alive. The air itself felt heavy, pressing down on your chest, squeezing the courage from your lungs with every breath. Marcus Kane stood at the entrance, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner begging for escape. He was not supposed to be here. 3 months ago he was nobody, a failed businessman drowning in debt. His wife had left him. His children would not answer his calls. He was sleeping in his car, eating from gas stations, counting the days until everything collapsed around him. Then the light came. A beam of impossible brightness tore through the night sky and lifted him from a parking lot in Nevada. No explanation, no warning, just selection. For weeks he traveled through corridors of starlight, through dimensions that bent like paper, until he arrived here in the kingdom of Vaelthrix, where an ancient being had ruled for 10,000 years. And now that being sat before him on a throne carved from the bones of dead stars. King Vaelthrix was not humanoid. He was something older, something that existed before time learned to move forward. His form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as shadow, sometimes as blinding light, sometimes as something that made Marcus's eyes water and his mind scream to look away. But his voice was terrifyingly human. Marcus Kane of Earth, you have been chosen for the trial of worth. Marcus swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means you will be tested, and the universe will learn what you truly are. 2 pedestals rose from the floor with a grinding sound that echoed through eternity. On the left stood mountains of gold, not just coins but artifacts, jewels, treasures from 1,000 conquered worlds. Enough wealth to solve every problem Marcus had ever faced. Enough to buy respect. Enough to buy love. Enough to buy a life worth living. On the right there was only darkness. Marcus squinted, trying to see what lay in the shadows. And then he saw her. She was barely visible at first, just a shape curled against a pillar of black stone. But as his eyes adjusted, the horror became clear. Chains covered her body. Not ordinary chains but something organic, metallic vines that had grown into her skin over centuries, fusing with her flesh, becoming part of who she was. Her hair, once perhaps golden, had turned white as ash. Her skin was pale as moonlight, stretched thin over bones that had not known warmth in 200 years. But her eyes were open, and they were looking directly at him. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Not his heart, but something deeper, something he did not know existed until that very moment. She did not speak. She could not. A metal collar around her throat had sealed her voice away long ago. But her eyes spoke volume. Help me. Please. Do not leave me here. King Vaelthrix's voice slithered through the air like poison. Her name is Seraphine. She was a princess once, from a world that no longer exists. Her people defied me, so I took her. And I have kept her as a reminder. A reminder of what? Marcus whispered. That defiance has a price. That hope is a currency I control. That no matter how strong you believe yourself to be, I am stronger. The king rose from his throne, and the room seemed to shrink around them. Now, Marcus Kane, you will choose. Take the gold and return to your world as the richest man alive. Every debt erased. Every dream fulfilled. You will live as a king among mortals, and your name will be spoken with reverence for generations. Marcus's mouth went dry. And if I choose her, then she goes free. But you leave with nothing. No gold, no glory. Just the knowledge that you saved a stranger who means nothing to you. A stranger whose name you will forget within a year. A stranger who will never repay you, never thank you, never remember your sacrifice. The king smiled, if that shifting darkness could be called a smile. Choose wisely, human. For this choice will define you forever. Marcus stood frozen between 2 futures. On one side lay salvation. Everything he had lost, everything he had dreamed, everything he had failed to achieve was right there, gleaming in impossible golden light. He thought of his children, how they looked at him with disappointment carved into their faces. How his son had said those words that still burned in his memory. You never gave us anything, Dad. How his daughter stopped inviting him to holidays because she was embarrassed to introduce him to her friend. With that gold, he could change everything. He could show them he was not a failure. He could buy their respect. He could finally be the father they deserved. Could he not? On the other side stood Seraphine. A stranger. Someone he had never met. Someone whose suffering was not his fault, not his responsibility, not his burden to carry. 200 years in chains was terrible, yes. But what was that to him? She was not his daughter. She was not his wife. She was not anyone who had ever cared about Marcus Kane. She was just a problem. Someone else's tragedy. A test designed to make him feel guilty for wanting a better life. Marcus took a step toward the gold, and then he made the mistake of looking back. Seraphine's eyes had not changed. They were not accusing him. They were not begging anymore. They were simply resigned, as if she had seen this moment play out 1,000 times before. As if she knew exactly what he would choose, because everyone chooses the gold. Everyone always chooses the gold. Marcus's hands trembled at his side. He thought of his mother. How she used to say the measure of a man is not what he takes but what he gives. He thought of every movie he had ever watched where the hero made the noble choice. He thought of who he wanted to be and who he actually was. The distance between those two people had never felt so vast. He walked toward the gold, step by step, his shoes clicking against the metal floor, the sound echoing through the chamber like a funeral march for his own soul. Seraphine's eyes followed him. Not with hatred, not with anger, just with understanding. The understanding of someone who had stopped believing in miracles 2 centuries ago. Marcus reached out his hand and touched the gold. It was warm, impossibly warm, as if the metal itself was alive, welcoming him, embracing him, telling him he had made the right choice. "I choose the gold," he said, and his voice did not shake. King Veilthrix laughed. It was the sound of galaxies dying, of hope being crushed beneath the weight of inevitability. "Of course you do. They always do." Marcus grabbed handfuls of coins, stuffing them into his pockets, his shirt, anywhere they would fit. He could not stop himself. The more he took, the more he needed. The gold was not just wealth anymore. It was validation. It was proof that he mattered. It was everything he had ever wanted. He did not look at Seraphine again. He could not. A portal opened behind him, swirling with blue light, promising to take him home. Marcus walked toward it without hesitation. But just before he stepped through, he heard something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A single tear hitting the stone floor. Not his tear. Hers. Marcus Kane returned to Earth as the richest man in the world. Within a week, he paid off every debt. Within a month, he bought a mansion that made celebrities jealous. Within a year, he had everything money could buy: cars, houses, yachts, respect, attention, admiration from strangers who had never cared about him before. His children called him now. They visited on holidays. They smiled and laughed and told him how proud they were. His ex-wife even reached out, saying she had made a mistake, asking if they could try again. Marcus Kane had won. So why did he wake up screaming every night? The dreams started the moment he returned. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Seraphine. Those resigned eyes. That single tear. The chains that would hold her for another 200 years because of his choice. He tried therapy. He tried medication. He tried drinking until he could not remember his own name. Nothing worked. The gold that once felt warm now felt like ice against his skin. The mansion felt like a prison. The laughter of his children sounded hollow, fake, bought with currency that had cost him something he could never name. One night, 3 years after he made his choice, Marcus sat alone in his bedroom surrounded by more wealth than any human had ever possessed. And he wept, not for himself, not for his loneliness, but for her. He finally understood what he had done. He had not just chosen gold over a stranger. He had chosen to become the kind of person who could make that choice. He had revealed to himself what lived at the core of his being. And it was empty. It was hollow. It was nothing. The years passed like water through fingers. Marcus tried to do good with his wealth. He donated billions to charity. He built hospitals and schools. He funded research that saved thousands of lives. But none of it mattered. Every child he saved reminded him of the one person he had abandoned. Every hospital bed was another chain around Seraphine's wrist. Every act of kindness was a desperate attempt to balance a scale that would never be level. His children grew to love him, truly love him, and that was the cruelest punishment of all. Because he knew the truth they would never know. Their father was not a good man. Their father was a coward who had traded a woman's freedom for gold and called it wisdom. On his deathbed, surrounded by family and friends and reporters waiting to document the passing of the world's greatest philanthropist, Marcus Kane spoke his final words. "Find her," he whispered to his eldest son. "Her name is Seraphine. She is chained in a kingdom among the stars. Find her. Free her. Tell her I am sorry." His son nodded, tears streaming down his face, not understanding but promising anyway. Marcus closed his eyes for the last time. And in the darkness that followed, he heard a voice he had not heard in 60 years. "King Veilthrix. Welcome back, Marcus Kane. I have been waiting for you." Marcus opened his eyes and found himself standing once again in that throne room of living metal and dying light. But this time there was no gold. This time, there was only a pillar of black stone and chains that had been forged just for him. "You see," the king said, "the gold was never the reward. The gold was the test, and you failed." Marcus looked down at his hands and saw the metallic vines already beginning to grow. Those who choose selfishness become prisoners of it. Those who choose greed become slaves to it. You wanted gold, Marcus Kane. Now you will have an eternity to remember what it cost you. The chains wrapped around his wrists, his ankles, his throat, and as the collar sealed away his voice forever, Marcus finally understood the true price of his choice. He would spend the next 200 years in this room, waiting, hoping, praying that someone would come and choose him over the gold. But deep in his heart, he already knew the truth. No one would. Because everyone chooses the gold. Everyone always chooses the gold. Seraphine stood at the entrance of the throne room, watching the new prisoner struggle against his chains. She had been freed. Not by Marcus, but by his son, who had spent 30 years searching the stars to fulfill his father's dying wish. She could leave now. She could walk away and never look back, but instead, she stepped forward and knelt beside the man who had abandoned her. "I forgive you," she whispered, knowing he could not hear her, knowing it did not matter, knowing that forgiveness was never about the person who hurt you. It was about freeing yourself from the chains they left behind. Seraphine stood, turned, and walked into the light of a universe she had not seen in 200 years. And Marcus Kane watched her go, understanding at last what he had lost. Not gold, not wealth, not even freedom. He had lost the chance to be remembered with love instead of pity, and that was a price no amount of gold could ever repay. This story is not about aliens or kings or treasures from distant worlds. This story is about you. Every day you face choices. Small ones, large ones. Choices that seem meaningless in the moment but define who you become. Will you choose the gold? Will you take the easy path, the comfortable path, the path that benefits only yourself? Or will you choose the chains? Will you sacrifice something precious to lift someone else out of their darkness? The universe is watching, and unlike Marcus Kane, you still have time to make the right choice. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own choices, then do something right now. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of people who believe that humanity is worth fighting for. Hit that like button if you believe that compassion is stronger than greed. And leave a comment telling me about a time when you chose love over gold, when you helped a stranger, when you proved that not everyone makes the selfish choice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is standing at their own crossroads, wondering which path to take. Because the truth is, we are all Marcus Kane. We all face the gold. And we all have to decide what we are willing to sacrifice for it. Thank you for watching until the end. Your presence here means more than any treasure in the universe. Until next time, remember, the measure of your life is not what you take. It is what you give.